Ever thought about how water has been our companion from birth to death?
How so?
Well, think about it. We're born in water, as a matter of fact. A baby spends 9 months submerged in the amniotic fluid, which is composed mostly of water. Once born, bathing becomes a daily ritual. We use water to clean ourselves, drink to keep us hydrated, swim for recreation, and get caught in the occasional rain shower.
Never thought about it that way.
And that's not all. Besides physical contact, water finds its way into many of our religious rituals, cultural practices, and celebrations.
Can you offer a few examples?
Certainly, Harper. Drawing from Christianity, baptism is a widely recognized water-based ceremony that symbolizes spiritual purification. Many communities around the world also have unique water festivals with historical roots stretching back centuries. Furthermore, water is a major constituent in many purification rituals. Think of the Roman bathing houses or Korean bathhouse tradition.
So, the addition of water in these traditions could be symbolic of cleansing, renewal, and life then?
Yes, and this is true across different cultures and eras. It makes one question, don't you think? What would our traditions be like without this universally significant element, water? So to start with, let's talk about the Romans and their bathing practices. Think about your last spa visit, Harper. Could you imagine it started from a similar experience in the ancient Roman times?
It's a thought the historians are still mulling over, JooHyun. They were infamous for their thermal baths, right?
Very true. Now picture elaborate public bathhouses filled with heated rooms, cold plunge pools, gymnasiums, libraries, even snack bars. Now that's what I call a comprehensive service.
So it was sort of a community center instead of just a place for getting clean.
Exactly, Harper. It was in fact a key social institution, acting as a meeting spot, a place to relax and even conduct business. Socializing was just as important as hygiene.
I guess modern-day spas have adopted the same belief of holistic well-being, beyond mere physical cleanliness.
Absolutely. The tangible piece of ancient culture particularly survived in Korea and Japan, where public baths are still popular.
Would you say ancient Roman bathing customs have influenced our modern spa culture significantly?
I believe so. The elements of relaxation, social engagement, and personal wellness are all deeply ingrained in our contemporary spa visits. The design philosophy of present-day spas also reflects Roman ideas of comprehensive service. A fitting tribute, don't you think?
JooHyun, I can't help but ponder upon the societal role of these public bathhouses in Rome. Could you encapsulate its presence and its implications in Roman society?
Well, Harper, these bathhouses, known as thermae, were an amalgamation of myriad facilities. You would find warm bathing rooms, large open-air pools, smaller specialized plunge baths, even gymnasiums for exercise. But most fascinating? These establishments served more than just hygiene. They permeated the social fabric of Roman society, fostering communities. The grandeur with which they were constructed speaks volumes about their importance.
This definitely draws an interesting parallel to our modern community centers. So how did these bathing rituals practically function? Were there any particular customs associated?
Oh, the Roman bathing rituals were a process, Harper. First, the Romans would start with the warm room or the tepidarium to acclimatize their bodies. After this, they'd proceed to the caldarium or the hot room, and finally the frigidarium, or the cold room. It's interesting to see this process mirrored in some modern spa treatments, isn't it?
It is indeed. And the meticulous nature of these processes reflects in our contemporary wellness trends. What about the accessibility of these bathhouses, JooHyun? Were they open to all strata of society?
Great question, Harper. Surprisingly, these baths were quite democratic, accessible to all regardless of their social status. With a few quadrans, which was the smallest Roman coin, one could afford a bath, underscoring their public nature. They stood as a testament to easy public welfare in ancient times. Now we've understood the architectural and social significance of Roman bathhouses, let's explore the rituals in detail. For Romans, their visit to the bathhouse wasn't merely about washing off the dirt. The process was a kind of psychological and physiological transformation. Entering a warm, humid environment from their usual dry and cooler atmosphere was designed to help them safely transition between temperatures.
This procedure seems quite detailed. Was this transition necessary?
Absolutely, Harper. The transition not only ensured physical comfort, but also elevated the entire experience into a holistic therapy. Metaphorically speaking, imagine walking into a safe space that's emotionally warmer and welcoming, freeing you from the everyday pressures. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? That
Certainly does. It's almost like stepping into a therapeutic spa today.
Exactly. Today's spas, saunas, and wellness retreats owe much to these ancient communal customs. Roman bathing was an institution, a harmonious symphony of communal interaction and hygiene maintenance. For today's wellness enthusiasts, their luxury spa retreat might well be a Roman tradition wrapped in modern aesthetics.
I see an incredible connection here, a testament to how ancient practices continue to influence our lives today. JooHyun, could you detail how these customs transform to fit into the modern world?
I'd be glad to, Harper. As societies evolved, these practices followed suit, keeping core values intact while augmenting with the advancements of the age. Bathing became a solitary activity in the Middle Ages due to plague fear, and in the modern age, it was encapsulated as a tranquil, personal experience. However, the essence of rejuvenation and relaxation remained the same.
Pivoting from our discussion about communal bathing, let's delve into an element of spiritual purification. We're talking about the usage of water in religious narratives and baptism rites. This isn't exclusive to a single culture or religion. Most spiritual teachings have somehow incorporated the concept of water as a purifying element. Can you think of a few examples, JooHyun?
Undeniably, water has been a symbolic presence in various religious narrations, performing the role of a purifier, or sometimes even a divine blessing in itself. In Christianity, for instance, the ritual of baptism employs water, signifying the purification and rebirth of the individual.
The ritual of baptism is indeed prominent in Christianity. It symbolizes washing away punishment for sins, marking the rebirth of the participant. But baptism is not homogeneously practiced across Christian denominations, right?
That's right, Harper. There are denominational differences when it comes to baptism rituals. These variances are usually attributed to historical and interpretational changes over time within faith communities. It's essentially an evolution of the original concept.
That's definitely a fascinating point, JooHyun. In essence, there are age-old traditions, still living and breathing, adapting themselves to contemporary contexts. Historically, the symbolism of water as a purifying entity has stood the test of time and transcended geographical and cultural boundaries.
Building upon your introduction, Harper, I'd like to trace the evolution of water blessing rituals into our modern baptism ceremonies. We know these practices originated in the early Christian church, but water-related rituals date back even further in various cultures.
You're mentioning water blessing rituals inherent in other cultures, before the advent of Christianity, aren't you, JooHyun? For instance, water has been an element of spiritual cleansing in pagan beliefs too.
Yes, and not just paganism. Ancient Egyptians employed water in their purification rites as well. The priests underwent ritualistic baths to cleanse themselves before performing religious ceremonies. The ancient Greeks, too, embraced the concepts of water purification and spiritual cleanliness. They believed that individuals must cleanse themselves physically and morally before entering a temple.
So this resonates with the symbolism of cleansing and rebirth in Christian baptism, right?
Indeed, Harper. You'll notice that the ritual immersion in water across these different cultures is stylized as an act of purification, cleansing, rebirth, or regeneration. This is the thematic thread that weaves itself seamlessly into the Christian practice of baptism.
How do these historical roots translate into modern baptism practices, JooHyun?
Well, today's baptism practices have certainly evolved while retaining the symbolic underpinnings. In traditional Christian connections, the act of baptism oftentimes signifies a commitment to faith or a spiritual rebirth, grazing the same plot lines as its predecessors. It's interesting to see how these rituals, grounded in history, have adapted over time and taken on new meanings in current practices. Let's stay with Christian baptism for now. Harper, as an educator in the States, your familiarity with Christian proceedings would surpass mine, especially regarding the variety in baptismal practices within different sects.
Actually, that's an interesting point. Christian churches do indeed have divergent practices when it comes to baptisms. From my study and observation, this divergence seems to hinge on their interpretations of the Bible.
Can you give an example for clarification? Let's say the interpretation differences between Catholic and Baptist churches?
Yes, that's a good example. The Catholic Church tends to baptize infants, viewing it as a means to remove the original sin. Essentially, they see it as a responsibility, a kind of spiritual safeguarding on behalf of the child. In contrast, most Baptist churches prefer to delay baptisms until the person is mature enough to consciously choose their faith.
So, essentially, it could be said that the timeline of person's baptism might indicate their respective sect within Christianity.
Well, yes, in a way. Other denominations have their own unique baptism practices as well.
And then comes the question of the rite itself. Is there any commonality with the procedure of these baptisms across these divergent sects?
The procedure often involves some form of water, either by immersion, pouring, or sprinkling. However, the way baptisms are carried out can differ. Catholics and Orthodox Christians typically include baptism as part of a more extensive ceremony, while Baptists and many Protestant denominations often view baptism as a separate sacrament, performed with utmost solemnity.
Shift our gaze now from our baptismal fonts to the vast, unending oceans. I'm sure, Harper, you are familiar with beach outings and the games we play there?
Absolutely. Who doesn't love a good beach day? Building sandcastles, playing beach volleyball, or simply floating in the water. Nearly everyone has such memories.
Do you ever wonder where these beach activities come from, or why we partake in them?
I hadn't given it much thought, but now you've sparked my curiosity. Are you suggesting our beach activities are, in a way, the modern version of ancient maritime rituals?
Indeed, ancient cultures that were dependent on the sea for sustenance had explicit customs surrounding their seafaring activities. These seafaring celebrations often had a communal aspect that allowed the society to come together, much like how modern beach activities tend to bring people closer to one another.
That's quite fascinating. Can you shed light on how these seafaring traditions evolved into our beach activities?
Take, for example, sailors of old celebrated a safe return from a voyage with grand ceremonies, which included music, dance, and feasting. Sound familiar?
Aha! That sure does sound like a beach barbecue party.
Precisely. Even sandcastle building, derivative of the desire to mark one's presence, claim territory, or merely wish to create something under the open sky. The sea is, after all, a vast canvas that invites one to leave their imprint, however fleetingly.
Okay, JooHyun, staying with seafaring, there's another fascinating aspect: the age-old sailor superstitions. Believe it or not, these have helped shape various maritime traditions and even impact our beach activities.
How so?
Well, suppose we look back at times when reaching a destination was not certain, when voyages were perilous, fraught with numerous unknown dangers. Sailors developed superstitions and rituals to attempt to gain control over the sea's unpredictability.
Such as?
Oh, there were many. For instance, damaging or sinking a boat intentionally was seen as a tremendous offense towards the sea gods. In fact, old ships were often decommissioned and repurposed, not destroyed.
Wasn't there a belief about women on ships, too?
Indeed, women were considered bad luck on board, because they were believed to make the sea jealous. However, women were also thought to calm the sea, which is why many ships were named after women and displayed female figureheads on their prow.
Interesting. And these practices and beliefs have a bearing on our contemporary beach traditions?
Indirectly, yes. Quite like how sailors revered the sea and treaded with caution, we observe signs of respect towards nature even in our beach activities. Children making sandcastles might appear playful, but it could also be seen as a form of marking respect, admiration, and acknowledgement of the sea's power, much like the figureheads on ships. Have you ever thought about the symbolism water holds in different cultures, JooHyun?
In Korea, where I was born, Water often represents purity and cleansing, and the belief extends to various rituals and ceremonies.
Fascinating. Around the world, we can see the same symbolism of water being used in purification practices. I think it refers to the transformative power of water, the way it flows, cleanses, and renews everything it touches. Don't you think so?
I believe so. Its ability to wash away impurity is literal and symbolic. The sight of flowing water can bring a sense of peace and calmness. How about the use of water in religious practices, Harper?
It's remarkably universal. Native American ceremonies often use water for blessing and purification, similar to Christian baptism. And looking east, Hindu rituals frequently use water as a symbolic purifier in multiple rites, while it's crucial for the Islamic cleansing ritual of wudu too.
Why do you think this symbolism prevails so universally and enduringly?
I think it's because water is such an elemental part of life. We need it to survive, and our bodies are largely made up of water. That's why across cultures and centuries, it naturally becomes a symbol of life, purity, and transformation.
Harper, I perceive you concur with the perceived purifying property of water found in various cultures. Let's tap into my roots. Korea, for instance. Bathing rituals aren't just physical purifications, they are also seen as spiritual cleanses. A good example of this is the Korean ritual of mugwort baths. This practice is used to ward off evil spirits and bring about good luck for the new year.
Mugwort baths? That sounds intriguing. How does it work, JooHyun?
The ritual is simple yet profound. Fresh mugwort leaves are boiled in large pots and then added to bathwater. The scent of these leaves is believed to cleanse the body of negative energies. You then bathe in this herbal water, allowing the restorative power of the mugwort to cleanse and renew your spirit. A majority of Koreans start their new year by immersing themselves in these mugwort-infused baths.
That's quite a unique custom. Do you think these rituals carried over into modern practices?
Entirely possible, Harper. You see, today's beauty industry heavily emphasizes detoxification and purification, very in line with the concepts of our age-old water rituals. Think of the numerous bath salts, charcoal-infused soaps, and the hydrotherapy treatments offered at most spas. Considering this from a historical perspective, they echo the same idea. Water detoxifies and cleanses the body. I find it captivating how rituals that originated centuries ago still resonate in our contemporary customs.
So, JooHyun, we've covered a lot about water-based traditions in terms of rituals, everyday customs, and even holidays. But what strikes me now is the element of survival. Swimming, for instance, didn't it begin as a survival skill?
Yes, Harper, you're correct. Swimming did start as a means of survival. In many cultures globally, the ability to swim was seen as a crucial life skill used for hunting, survival, and even warfare. In fact, there's this fascinating story from ancient Rome. Soldiers were required to be able to swim hand in hand while fully dressed in armor. It was called natare cum armis, or swimming with arms. They incorporated these tests in their military training to ensure survival during naval battles.
Wow. Swimming as a prerequisite for warfare, now that is something new.
Yeah, fascinating, isn't it? And as civilizations grew, they began forging rivers and oceans, discovering different lands. Here, swimming was not just about survival, it was about exploration, adventure. Gradually, it shifted into a recreational activity.
So, when did this shift occur?
The transformation isn't entirely clear, but if we trace back to the Roman era again, they had lavish bathhouses with large pools. Aside from the bathing rituals, these areas were also used for leisurely swimming. These recreational activities eventually guided the path for swimming to be seen as a competitive sport, like we see it today, and less as a survival skill. But undoubtedly, its deep-seated roots in survival cannot be ignored. Now, tracing back to the timeline of swimming evolution, more delightful stories surface. As civilizations grew and people began crossing rivers and oceans, they encountered bodies of water with unknown depths and unknown perils. Hence, it became not only crucial for survival, but also necessary to explore uncharted territories. But here's an interesting thought, Harper. Aren't competitive sporting events in essence a mode of survival within a societal framework?
JooHyun, that's a riveting perspective. Unpack that for me a bit more, would ya?
All right, think about it. In primitive times, survival was directly dependent on one's skills like swimming, hunting, or gathering. The strongest, the fastest, had higher chances of survival. But as societies evolved, these competitive aspects were somewhat blurred within modern structures, yet they didn't disappear entirely. We see this competitive spirit seeping into all facets of society, including sports. Nowadays, swimming competitions, for instance, are less about survival in raw terms and more about societal recognition, personal achievement. But at its core, it is a derivative of that same instinct, to be the best, to survive amidst competition.
Swimming really has come a long way from survival mechanism to a societal sport, a testament to our adaptive nature. Now, can you tell us some stories where swimming was taught as a survival skill?
Most certainly, Harper. In ancient Egypt, swimming was instrumental in crossing the Nile for fishing and during floods. Hieroglyphic paintings dating back to 2500 BCE depict Egyptians armed with flotation devices made of reeds, learning to swim. On the other side of the world, indigenous Australians were known for their swimming and diving skills, much a survival necessity due to their proximity to bodies of water. These instances highlight the instrumental role of swimming in erstwhile societies. Harper, have you ever heard about the Songkran festival in Thailand?
I have, JooHyun. It's essentially a giant water fight, right?
Absolutely, but there is also a more profound aspect to it. The water fights might be what catches the eye, but at its core, Songkran is a celebration of the Buddhist New Year. Devotees visit temples for prayer and purification rituals. There is also a significant custom of gently pouring water over Buddha statues and the hands of elders. It symbolizes cleansing and the washing away of sins and bad luck to welcome the new year.
And what about the Holi festival in India? I heard that it involves water as well.
Absolutely, Holi, also called the Festival of Colors, originally celebrated the arrival of spring and good harvests. But over the years, it's taken on additional symbolic meaning. The throwing of colored water represents the playful pranks of Krishna, a deity in Hinduism. It's fascinating how each culture uniquely represents water in their festivities, isn't it?
It truly is, JooHyun. There's also the indigenous celebration in North America, where tribes welcome the first spring run of salmon. It involves various water rituals and is an age-old homage to the cycles of life and renewal. It shows how water-based festivals often resonate with universal themes like purification, renewal, and life.
Indeed, the symbolism of water remarkably transcends geographical boundaries, whether in renewal traditions of Songkran or Holi, or the salmon ceremony you just mentioned. This demonstrates the unifying power of water celebrations across cultures. Remarkable, isn't it, Harper? How one single element, water, has spawned such a diverse array of customs and rituals across time and cultures.
Yes, JooHyun. It's fascinating how water-based practices have not only survived but continue to be integral parts of contemporary culture. Whether it's the communal baths from Roman times that find parallel in today's spa culture, or the ancient belief in water's purifying ability that resonates in baptism and renewal rituals.
That's a great point. Through this exploration, we've seen how water, beyond its elemental necessity, possesses a profound symbolic depth, signifying purity, life, renewal, and even community. We've seen it create a common thread across disparate societies, binding them through shared narratives of celebration, consolation, or even just daily living.
Absolutely. And it's this constant interweaving of the past and present, the universal and the unique, that makes these traditions so compelling, so relevant. Whether it's the joyous abandon of a water fight during the Songkran festival or the solemn immersion during a baptism, water plays a seductively contrasting role, playful yet sacred. It seems that our relationship with water is not merely passive or utilitarian. It's deeply emotional and fundamentally human.
Very well observed, Harper. It's also interesting to think about the unexplored customs or the ones that got lost in the labyrinth of time. Who knows what novel insights they could give us into the imaginative ways our ancestors connected with water, and in turn, connected with life itself.
It's a thought to ponder upon, for sure. Well, listeners, we've aimed to give you new perspectives on water rituals, and we hope you found them as intriguing as we have. Perhaps the next time you're at a spa, or in a baptism, or splashing water at a beach, remember the rich history behind it. After all, water is not just a source of life, but also a source of stories.